So, real quick, I want to make a point. I want to reiterate a point um, that the media is not going to be honest about. Or I don't even think, honestly, I don't really think most people in the media know. And a lot of them just kind of are following the narrative. I don't even think most representatives know. The Fed knows. People like Pelosi and you know senior leadership that'll be there, be in Congress permanently or be in offices. Like a lot of them know, but I don't think like the average uh, congressman or anyway. The Federal Reserve's goal, is not to slow inflation. They will if they can, but that's actually not what their goal is. Their goal and their actions this year have proven it. Their goal is to preserve US dollar dominance. Their goal is to make sure that there's no serious competitor to the US dollar. Um, so, what have they done? They've hiked rates. Their job is to make sure that the dollar remains the tallest midget in the room relative to other currencies. So, one of the ways that they do this, as weaker, smaller currencies around the globe wither and die because we're in a global financial crisis, that causes more and more demand for US dollars. So when equities are selling off, when bonds are selling off, when gold and silver are selling off, which are rehypothecated paper contracts, by the way, that does not reflect the real price. That's another conversation. When cryptocurrencies are selling off, when every asset class is selling off, and the US 10-year yield is rising, the dollar is getting stronger. The relative strength of the dollar, the Dixie, okay? Now, if the Russian ruble, here's something you will not hear in the mainstream. You will not hear the US government talk about this. The Russian ruble is becoming stronger and stronger since the war in Ukraine began. The Russian ruble. Their debt to GDP ratio is somewhere around like 20%. The US is well over 100% by now. It's been well over 100% for a while. So they jacked up their interest rates earlier in the year and lowered them. That's what they can do with their country. So Russia, who's a very commodity rich country, they have tons of natural resources and they're not possessed by Marxism anymore. They lived through that shit and they're not going back to it. Okay. We're now playing that game and they're more than happy to sell their oil to the Chinese and the Indians. They're happy to do it. To the Iranians, and Europeans can pay double the price for oil. We don't have it as bad in the US as the Europeans by any means. But that's why when the media paints this narrative that like this is the 1970s and we're going to get inflation under control, the way we got inflation under control back then was jacking interest rates up to like 20%. We cannot do that. In order for if the US were to do that to tame inflation, there would be defaults everywhere, for one thing. And the second thing is the interest on the debt that the U.S. government would have to pay it would literally be unpayable. Interest on the debt is almost the biggest budget item in the U.S. It will soon be there, and raising interest rates just makes it impossible for the U.S. government to service its debt. And by the way, as the economy contracts, because it is contracting and we are in a recession, we have negative GDP growth. As the economy contracts, that lowers the amount of revenue that the U.S. government is raising, which means there's a greater deficit, which means more borrowing, which means ultimately more money printing or more debt monetization. And again, more inflation. We're in a vicious cycle right now. So, fun fact, even against Bitcoin, gold, all those other currencies versus the euro, the Australian dollar, Canadian loonie, and all that, and all the, developing country currencies, the US dollar looks like the safe haven, especially when the invasion first began in Ukraine. The dollar got incredibly strong versus the ruble even, and then absolutely crashed through the floor relative to the ruble. The euro is really crashing through the floor relative to the ruble, and it's below parity with the US dollar now. I haven't checked it this morning, so I don't know. But either way, the euro, forget about it, man. It's not going to keep parity with the dollar. It doesn't stand a chance. There's a war in Europe, and they do not even have the capacity to be energy independent. Like Trump was right when he told Germany like they need to not be dependent on Russian oil. Like he was right, and I mean, come on. But anyway, you play with Marxism, and this is these are the prizes you win. So the best performing currency this year goes to the Russian ruble. You won't hear that in American media. Physical silver. So I'm a big believer in this stuff. Bitcoin is the future. All right. I believe that Bitcoin is the best currency on the planet. I am not afraid of the Fed's current actions. I know the long game, and I know that holding this stuff and Bitcoin is a winning bet long run. And I'm fine with people thinking I'm the crazy guy. Most people have their money in a Roth or a bank account or something, and you know what, man, like it's so funny because that's just government promises. Even if your money's in a Roth, okay, the SEC, the bank that you use, your broker, whatever, all the third parties involved in your wealth, like just say your money's in a Roth, okay, if that's where all your money is, China invades Taiwan, Russia sets off a nuke, anything like that happens, you don't know that that's your money. You don't know that that's your money. First off. Second of all, China invades Taiwan, something like that happens, good, you can see your 401k drop 80% and not recover for years. Like you could totally see that. Like you can see that. We're coming out of this era of dollar dominance, this spoiled decades of nothing can touch us. So we're making really stupid decisions as Americans. I'm not against having a Roth at all. Of course, I'm not against it. I'm not against holding equities, especially if they're solid, good dividend-paying companies that are actually growing. I like ExxonMobil. I like some mining companies as well, among other companies. But this stuff that has to be mined from the Earth's crust, do your own research on physical silver. Aside from Bitcoin, which is my favorite asset of all time, aside from Bitcoin, this is the best asset you can hold. By the way, don't ever polish your silver bullion. Okay, that actually, I don't know if you can tell, but whoever I got this from a dealer, but whoever sold it to him, I was able to get it cheaper because he had polished the coin. So don't polish your bullion; it actually lowers the value. But I got a deal on it, and I just think it's cool, and I like to hold physical silver. So, but that's the best bet. So inflation, it's not going away, by the way. Like even if it declines here and there, the overall trend going forward is an increase in inflation. That's not going to stop. And the Fed's job is to make sure that the dollar has the appearance of, the illusion of strength. That is the strongest currency. It's the best place to park your cash. So as we enter a recession and ultimately a depression, they want you to hold your wealth in US dollars, a currency that is being inflated away. Here's another thing. Let's just say the Fed is capable of getting inflation down to 4% next year. By the way, if the Fed really wanted to slow inflation, they would have to get the Fed funds rate above where the rate of inflation currently is, which they're not even close to that. This is all about perception, public faith. This is what this all is. Let's say they were able to get inflation down to 4% next year. All right. That's still 4% inflation on top of the 9% inflation that we just had this year. So even if they slow inflation, even if they get it all the way back down to their 2% target, everything just raised in price and is not going back down in price necessarily. I mean, it depends on what you're buying, but rents are going to continue to go up. The everyday things that are most important are where inflation is going to be hit the hardest, because those are the things that people are going to continue to buy. Rent, even gasoline. There'll be periods of demand destruction we'll see periodically. I think crude oil is trading in the low 80s right now. It was, I think it made its way up to like 130 earlier in the year. And I'll say it again, crude oil is going much higher. And depending on the Fed's actions, we might have further to go in this bear market if you're following the markets. Now, Here's the thing. Markets are pumping today. Okay. Markets have been they've been declining this year. All right. The reason that they're rallying today is because the European Union is stepping in with more stimulus because they're in an energy crisis. And the US is going to follow suit. The Federal Reserve is going to follow suit. So this might be the moment in these next few months where the Fed pivots and we start saving the global economy again. That is massively inflationary. So they are just like they were propagandizing the hell out of you about that that ailment that affected our lives for the past 2.5 years that I'm not going to mention. You can expect. Got to be honest with you, I lost my train of thought. You can expect some chaos. You can expect inflation to continue to rise. And you can expect the news media to keep spinning and the politicians keep spinning that everything's under control. We are an economy that's contracting. The whole world economy is contracting. The U.S. is the best place to be. And I'm excluding places like Dubai or these little places that can't feed or defend themselves militarily. I'm not talking about those little safe havens, but as far as nation states that actually can defend themselves and be thoroughly independent, like the U.S. is the best example. I'm pretty sure the U.S. is the only sovereign entity that can actually feed and defend itself. I don't even think China can do that, but I don't remember. I know Europe sure as fuck can't. Europe sure as fuck can't. You know who the next competitor is to the U.S.? Honestly, people don't talk about this, and it goes completely contrary to everything that the average American believes. The biggest competitor, and there's only one thing holding them back, and it's their corruption. The biggest competitor to the U.S. economy is Russia. You could say it's China. Russia is rich in natural resources. They're making economic moves, and they're a legit player. It's very possible. I don't think we're moving out of a unipolar world where the U.S. calls the shots. We had that for about 30 years, completely blew it. After the Soviet Union collapsed, we became the dominant player, dictated the policy around the world. I don't see that. I see a tripolar world with the U.S., Russia, and China competing for power. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Europe. Honestly, Europe is either going to collapse into multiple states or it's going to become like a Marxist super state like China, except run by people who are dumber. So that's what's going to happen to Europe. I know a lot of Americans are fixated with European utopias and all that. Well, good luck, because they're in a worse situation than us, and the lifestyle that they live for the past few decades that we think is so amazing, is going to collapse in on them way harder than the U.S. U.S. has a way better shot than Europe, and I really hope the U.S. doesn't dissolve. It's very possible. We're in a very serious problem, and the reason that the political divide is so bad is because we've mismanaged money so badly since the 70s, since before the 70s. The reason that the 70s even began and we had to depeg and go on a debt standard was because of Vietnam, the Great Society, and all these things that we couldn't afford. We had to default on our gold promise and go on to a debt standard, a fiat standard. And it's democracy for you. That's giving 18-year-olds the vote for you. That's thinking it's cute. That's saying, oh, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Yeah, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but people who say that are people who think their opinions are equal to all others. All opinions are not equal. Yeah, you're entitled to your opinion. All opinions are not equal. That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Okay? Buy yourself some of this stuff. Some physical silver. Perhaps some gold. I don't recommend gold for certain reasons, unless you can really afford it. I'm not going to explain why. But and definitely buy yourself some Bitcoin and take custody of your own private keys. And don't mess with shitcoins. All right? Don't buy SHIB or Dogecoin. I don't care what Elon Musk says. People, don't be followers. Stop with that shit. Don't be a follower. Don't buy Dogecoin because you think Musk is going to pump it up or anything. Dude, know what's happening before you. Have a significant cash position so you can take advantage of opportunities. Make sure you actually have some physical cash, by the way. Don't leave all of it in the bank. Yes, have some equities. Have your 401k. Have some Bitcoin. Have some precious metals. But keep yourself informed. Keep yourself informed. Keep yourself in the loop. The inflation situation is going to get worse. And the politicians are going to continue to spend more and more. And it really doesn't matter if we have a Republican Congress next year. They're not going to be able to fix it. They're not. As a matter of fact, I don't care what the makeup of Congress is next year. I know for a fact they're going to spend an astronomical sum of money. It would not. I bet you Congress spends $10 trillion next year to fix this. We would not. I bet you it spends $10 trillion. Yeah, that's where we are. So 2019 or 2020, fixing that cost, I think, $6 trillion, maybe $8 trillion. With the stimulus and the corporate bailouts and all that. By the way, most of this inflation, don't think it's because of your stimulus checks. That's a part of it, but your stimulus checks was a small percentage of the actual money that was handed out. Those stimulus checks were to alleviate the constituents of Congress, obviously, right? To give you a little handout as they fucked you, but was to make you think that's the source of inflation, when in reality, it's the debt monetization by the Fed and all this money that they're giving out to corporate America. That's why there's no diversity of thought in the corporate world in America. Apple, Google, that's why they all virtue signal the same Marxist shit, because they don't care. They're getting their money from Congress. And where's Congress getting their money from? Congress is getting their money from the Fed. So this is all centralized. This is why we need separation of money and state. We need separation of money and state. This is what this right here is. This is constitutional money. Okay. We need separation of money and state. We need the government to have some fiscal restraints, or we're going to see a collapse of an empire, the collapse of the American empire, the collapse of really the West. They've really put themselves in a bad situation. But I'm hopeful. I actually think Bitcoin kind of solves a lot of the political circus. People don't realize it yet, and it'll take some time, but be patient, because that's the logical conclusion. It's game theory. Yeah. So Russian ruble, again, I want to bring that up. Russian ruble is the best performing currency right now. More than gold, more than the dollar. Yeah. Relative strength of the dollar is increasing because the ruble is not included in that basket of currencies.